In the day's other news, the financial markets were convulsed again by fears of economic disruption from the coronavirus outbreak. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 879 points, closing at 27,081. It's down a record 1,900 points in the last 2 days. The Nasdaq today fell 255 points, and the S&P 500 gave up 97. President Trump wrapped up his visit to India tonight with a state banquet in New Delhi. Earlier, he toured the Grand Palace with First Lady Melania Trump and praised their reception. He declined comment on new violence over a citizenship law that excludes Muslims. But in New Delhi's streets, cars were charred and fruit stands wrecked after Hindu mobs attacked Muslims. At least 10 people died in the last 2 days. The president also criticized 2 liberal justices on the Supreme Court today. Sonia Sotomayor had complained that the court is too often intervening in the administration's favor before cases play out. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had singled out then-candidate Trump back in 2016. The president suggested that they should not hear cases involving him.
I just don't know how they can not recuse themselves for anything having to do with Trump or Trump-related. The right thing to do is that. Now, as a Supreme Court justice is a different standard, but at the same time, I think it's a higher standard in a certain sense.
Later, the president tweeted that the judge and the jury foreman in the Roger Stone case were, quote, totally biased. Stone, who's a longtime Trump ally, was convicted of lying to Congress and witness tampering. The Supreme Court today barred a Mexican family from suing over a cross-border shooting that killed their son. A U.S. Border Patrol agent standing on the Texas side of the border killed the unarmed 15-year-old boy in 2010. The court's conservative majority ruled 5-4 that regulating the conduct of border personnel could undermine national security. In Syria, fierce fighting rocked Idlib province again, with both government forces and rebels capturing key towns. The Assad regime's offensive in Idlib, backed by Russia and Iran, has displaced nearly 1 million people since December. Displaced Syrians near the Turkish border organized a protest today amid desperate conditions. They waved opposition flags and chanted songs.
Today, we are gathered here to tell the whole world that even if there is just 1 inch of Syrian land left, we will continue to say down with President Bashar al-Assad, down with the Russian criminality, and down with the Iranian criminality.
Idlib is the last rebel stronghold in Syria. Turkey has demanded a halt to the Syrian offensive there. The U.S. State Department says that Afghanistan will postpone the inauguration of President Ashraf Ghani to a second term. Both Ghani and his main rival had claimed victory in last September's election. It's been widely reported that U.S. officials fear the dispute could disrupt peace efforts with the Taliban. Former Egyptian president and longtime U.S. ally Hosni Mubarak died today. Foreign Affairs correspondent Nick Schifrin reports his passing came almost a decade after he was ousted from power in the Arab Spring uprising.
In January 2011, the edifice of Hosni Mubarak's Egypt crumbled. He'd been called a modern-day pharaoh, but the millions who filled Cairo's Tahrir Square exposed a country weakened by decades of his corruption and cronyism. And the following month, many Egyptians celebrated his fall as the birth of democracy.
Everyone in Egypt is so happy now. A new change, freedom, and democracy.
But like much of the Arab Spring, elation preceded oppression. A democratically elected president was overthrown in a coup by former army chief and today's president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Mubarak outlived the revolution that overthrew him, but was only seen in court. And while he was humbled, to the end, he was defiant. He rose to power in the Air Force and became vice president to Anwar Sadat, taking over after Sadat's 1981 assassination. He was initially considered a charismatic reformer and fashioned himself the only guarantor of stability in Egypt and the Middle East, as he told NewsHour host Charlene Hunter-Gault in 1993.
The stability of this part of the world cannot be maintained without Egypt. I don't think that it will be in the interest of the West or the United States that Egypt be unstable.
But Mubarak's stability was autocracy. He jailed political opponents without trial, and his police committed widespread torture. Poverty increased, and the availability of bread plummeted. And when that deprivation combined with corruption to spark the 2011 protests, his security forces killed hundreds of demonstrators. In 2012, Mubarak defended himself from his sickbed. He was sentenced to life in prison, but successfully appealed. He later was sentenced to 3 years in prison on corruption charges, but was released in 2017. He died today in this hospital, remembered most not for his autocratic rule, but for the protests that ended it. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
Hosni Mubarak was 91 years old. Back in this country, an investigation of opera star Placido Domingo has found extensive allegations of sexual harassment. More than 24 people told a union for opera performers that they witnessed or fell victim to the misconduct while Domingo led the Washington and the Los Angeles operas. He apologized in a statement today. The drug maker Mallinckrodt is the latest to announce a major legal settlement involving opioids. The English company said today that it will settle hundreds of U.S. lawsuits for $1.6 billion. It's also filing for bankruptcy protection. Mallinckrodt is one of the biggest producers of opioids that are sold in the U.S. 39 states opened an investigation into e-cigarette maker Juul Labs today. The effort will examine whether Juul targeted young people and made misleading claims about nicotine content. The company's already facing a battery of lawsuits. And thousands of revelers filled New Orleans today for Mardi Gras. It came after 2 people had been killed by floats in earlier parades. Today, there were no incidents. Instead, bystanders waved and cheered as marching bands performed and elaborate floats moved through the city. Still to come on the NewsHour, South Carolina voters make up their minds as the Democratic hopefuls take the stage tonight in their next debate, questioning the attorneys on both sides of the case of convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein, and much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.